Welcome to the Equine Vet Connect Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Carter. I'm a veterinarian and a farrier. The goal of this podcast is to educate horse people, break things down, bust myths, and keep it real. Speaking of breaking things down, here's my legal disclaimer to keep my attorney and insurance company happy. While I am a vet, I may not be your vet. Contact them before trying anything you hear on this podcast. Remember, just because you watched it on YouTube or heard it on a podcast does not mean you can do it. Please use common sense. Welcome back to the Equine Vet Connect Podcast here at Countryside Equine Hospital. If y'all are watching today, we're not in the studio.
You might be very confused.
Yes, if you're not watching, you're probably not going to notice the difference. But normally we do this out in the treatment room, but turns out the downside to using a treatment room in a hospital for your podcast studio is sometimes hospital stuff has to happen out there.
Dr. Kate's being a real doctor today.
I know. We're in here podcasting, and she's being a real doctor. So,
if you can believe it, we all have real jobs.
I know.
Sometimes we actually do real medicine.
I know. We don't just podcast all day.
I wish, man.
I know.
One day, maybe.
I know. We could be
if we get big enough.
The Joe Rogan of Equine Med. So we got Dr. Brown back with us. If you are watching, this is actually, you're seeing an inside look of our office. When we're not actively practicing medicine, we're doing deep dives into literature reviews and doing the non-veterinary side of veterinary medicine. This is where it happens. So
the paperwork, the phone calls.
Yes. Reading the labs.
The jokes.
Every once in a while we do actually joke at work. So speaking of jokes, I've decided that's my new segue for everything.
Speaking of jokes.
I'm going to segue, which makes no sense whatsoever. But so Dr. Brown, today we're going to talk about a topic that comes up a lot in the spring of the years, but I'm talking about Moody mares.
Yes.
Moody mares. And everyone always thinks we have something wrong with an ovary. She's acting up. Must be an ovarian issue. But that's not always the case.
No, it is not. There was actually a retrospective study done at UC Davis within the last couple of years. They looked at all the mares that they've ever had that have been submitted for lab work to look at, behavior problems. So, under saddle, in the, everything there. 84% of the mares that they sent in did not have any sort of hormonal changes at all.
I can believe that because we deal with a lot of, we get a lot of calls about this. It's rarely a hormonal issue.
Yes.
Like that's probably the rarest, like of all the issues a mare is having behavioral issues. It is very rarely a hormonal cause.
Correct. But a lot of people seem to believe that that's what it is. And maybe that's an internalized misogyny thing, but we're not going to go there today. So that's a whole nother podcast. But, I think it's a very easy scapegoat for people to say, because it's a mare, they're being hormonal. We know that they cycle and that can cause some changes to behavior or, their mood or, what they're feeling. Absolutely, it can. But there's a lot of other causes of poor behavior or poor performance as well. And it's important that, not only we as veterinarians, but also horse owners and trainers can take our mare and look at the whole picture.
No, I agree because, looking at it when you really, and I think a lot of this comes from, we look at geldings and they're like, they're not having the behavioral issues. They've been castrated. But I'll be honest, I found that not to be true either.
We could do a whole Grumpy Geldings podcast too.
Grumpy Geldings exist.
It would be very similar to a lot of the things we're going to talk about today. So
like Moody mares, Grumpy Geldings. I mean, that's a whole thing that we talked to a lot of people about. And so digging into this, we're going to break down. This is going to be a multiple series podcast because we're going to talk about different things because I do believe the majority of these go back to some type of chronic pain. Whether that's a undiagnosed lameness issue, a neuromuscular issue, probably the number one we see is gastric ulcers. Huge cause of behavioral issues in horses. And we've kind of determined a lot of this boils down to chronic pain. And a lot of times it's low grade, but it's just enough that they're chronically uncomfortable. Like, I don't want to do this. Because we're asking a lot of these horses to perform at peak performance. And we're asking to do them when they're not comfortable. And so there's a lot of other causes that we're going to dive into over the coming weeks that can set us up for these moody mares. And really, anytime we say a moody mare, you can insert grumpy gelding into that. Like, really and truly, I don't think it has that much to do with the hormonal cycle. And the study out of UC Davis says the same thing.
Exactly.
So let's dive into when it is a hormonal issue, or when it is a mare. And I think to do that, we need to start off with what is the normal reproductive cycle, or the normal estrous cycle, as we call it.
Right. So horses are what we call seasonal polyestrous, in that they are only cycling regularly during certain parts of the year. And so for horses, when the daylight hours are the longest, that's when they're cycling. So we start in about the springtime, and then we're cycling through the late spring, early summer. And then as we get after that, summer solstice and the days start getting shorter, our cycles kind of start to taper off and we get irregular. And what happens with this is we have these things called transition periods, where there are hormones that are cycling during this time, but we're not actually ovulating. And I'd say that the majority of the time that we see problems in these mares is during those transition periods. That is when I start to get a lot of, I think, complaints about
April and October is what
April,
I like to say.
October. Yep.
Because when we talk about that light cycle, it's that 16 hours of light, 8 hours of dark. That's the magic timing to get these mares up and cycling. And it seems to, and the other thing I remember is 16 lumens.
Yes. 16
lumens, and I have no idea what a lumen is. But the way it was described to me is if you can read the fine print of a newspaper.
What's a newspaper?
I know most people. Hey, what's a newspaper? The other thing I thought about is that with or without my reading glasses. So I'm not sure which one that is, because as I've gotten older, I feel like 16 lumens is not near as bright as it used to be.
If you could read 8-point font, Times New Roman, printed out on a piece of paper, you could probably read, then you're probably good. So
there's our 16 lumens.
Someone figure that out. Someone figure out.
We should build little cards to hand to people and be like, if you can read this, you have 16 lumens.
Yes.
But yeah, and so that kind of explains that April, October, because we're getting an increase in daylight during those times. And when we get into that April time period, we're almost at that 16 and 8. So our estrous cycle is starting to work like it should. And when we look at, then it's functioning well through the summer. We get to that October time. Now we've got that decreasing light, and we're getting back to that same time period of we're not quite at 16 lumens, or we're not at quite that 16 and 8.
Correct.
Now, the thing to remember is we're here in Georgia, and this is going to change as far as time of the year. It's probably going to change depending on where you're at, as far as you got the equator, the further north you go. I love Montana in the summertime because it's daylight at 10 o'clock. I hate it in the wintertime because it's dark at 4 o'clock. So we're saying April and October, but we are in Georgia. The closer you get to the equator, the more even the days get. And there's differences in life cycles, or in light cycles, based on how far you are from the equator. But here in Georgia, April and October, that's our difficult times.
And as important as light is, darkness is just as important.
Yes.
They have to have darkness in order for this to go. You cannot have continuous light exposure. There has to be darkness.
One of the things I think about is I've had people that have brought in these mares that they're talking about, they're going crazy. Well, then you find out they decided that these mares needed a night light in the barn. And it's basically daylight in the barn all the time. And you sit there on 24 hours of daylight, it wrecks them. Other things people don't think about is they'll have security lights outside. And then these mares are putting their heads out of the stalls. They're getting triggered by this.
Or motion lights. Those will get them too. I've seen those.
The craziest one I had was a friend of mine had a mare that wasn't having issues. They bought the mare. Then she began to have issues. And so I was trying to figure out what was going on. Well, sure enough, I drive by and they put in a new roundabout near his farm. And I look out there and they've got up lights around this roundabout. And his mare's standing out there. And I was like, Jeff, it's daylight. You got to move this mare. She can't stay in this pasture anymore because she's literally out there on this roundabout with these lights. And it is plenty bright, even without my reading glasses.
Oh.
So it was an interesting...
I'd be pretty irritable too.
Yeah. So that's the thing. Light has a big play in this, but a lot of control over this estrous cycle.
Yes.
So, so let's keep doing through this. Let's go through the whole cycle, how it works and what could be going wrong.
Right. So we have 2 phases of this estrous cycle, and this cycle lasts 21 days. So we're talking from ovulation to ovulation. So, we'll kind of start kind of in the middle of the cycle with estrus. Estrus is the preparing for ovulation. It refers to a rise in estrogen is our dominant hormone here. And this estrogen is coming from what's called the follicle. And this follicle is where this ova is going to pop out of the ovary. And during this rise in estrogen, we start to see these typical estrus signs. That is what a lot of people seem to complain about when they're talking about moody mares. There's, this receptive to a stallion. So they are, I guess flirty is the best word I can say. They're very, they might be hollering a lot. They're standing, they're peeing, or what we call winking, where their vulva is making little tiny contractions. A lot of times they seem very maybe more sensitive to touch, to feeling. They might be looking around a little more. They seem a little more distracted by things because their body's telling them, all right, you got to get that stallion, got to go make a baby, let's go. And this can last anywhere from 2 to 8 days. As this estrogen is building up, our uterus is getting really soft, we're getting ready to ovulate. And this ends with ovulation, where this follicle is released by a big surge in something called the luteinizing hormone, or LH. After we get ovulation, then we get into our diestrus phase. And this is dominated by a structure called the corpus luteum, which I almost like to think is like a bruise on the ovary where the follicle just came out. And this corpus luteum is pumping out a hormone called progesterone. And this is our pregnancy maintenance hormone. So during this time, the uterus gets really tight. And we're kind of focusing on, all right, if we have a, embryo in here, we're making it nice and suitable in here. There's follicles that are coming in and out of this time, but they're not really doing anything because that progesterone's not really letting them come back. At the 14-day mark, if the uterus hasn't picked up that it has a embryo yet, we're going to go into something called luteolysis, where this luteinizing hormone I'm just getting backed up. So
if y'all think this is easy, it's not.
We're going to include some charts with this because this is crazy to talk about without having a whole chart in front of you.
So, to kind of keep things simple up to this point in time, we've got a surge in estrogen. We're building a follicle. We're getting ready. And I always say, this has 2 different meanings, right? For you, this is a good thing. You do breeding work.
I love this. This is great.
This is where you're fixing to make a baby. In my world, I'm trying to shut this whole thing down.
Yes.
I don't need this. So when we have that estrus phase, we have that increase in estrogen. This is where we're out there trying to find a stallion. This is also where some of the behavior can come in. When we actually luteinize that follicle and we start to we have ovulation, we're getting that now our dominant hormone is progesterone. And progesterone is what makes pregnant mares stay pregnant.
Yes.
So the body's like, okay, we're holding pregnancy. First, it is the follicle that does that. And then once we have implantation, now the uterus gets involved and it wants to make that same progesterone. But if we don't have an embryo, now we get to the luteinizing, or we get to the next phase.
Yes. And so that corpus luteum on that ovary, that will go away. And because that's not there anymore, pumping out progesterone, now our follicles can start growing. They pump out more estrogen. And then we come back into that estrous cycle, getting ready for the next ovulation.
And the crazy part, it's not like one or the other. all this is kind of mixed in together. So you're getting a little bit of an increase in one, decrease in the other. And it's going to be an ebb and flow as we move through the cycle.
And again, because these mares are seasonal. So what we're talking about, this very kind of simplified version of the cycle, we're seeing that, kind of late spring, early summer.
Starting about April is when things start to kind of get a little more predictable, a little more normal. But leading up to this and coming out of this, these hormones are all over the place. And especially during these transition periods, these hormones are going crazy. They're all over, but they're not strong enough to really get them to an ovulation. So they're not even really truly cycling. These hormones are kind of just going crazy. We're kind of sort of building a follicle. We're not getting enough of that LH serve to get this to ovulate.
Yes.
It's kind of the transition. I mean, it's more like they're getting stuck at certain places. It's like you're climbing up a hill, but you can't quite get over the hill is the way I would describe it.
And it's, really ironic because when we're going through these transition phases where our hormones are kind of figuring out what they're going to do, that's when our show seasons are starting.
Show seasons start about April when they're really good. And then the other thing is every finals in every discipline is going to be hitting right about that October time.
Correct.
And so it's like the two worst times a year if you have a mare, because that's your two biggest times of the year.
And so what we get into is people try to manipulate this cycle, which we'll talk about that in a little bit, how we can do that and safely do that. But what I've come to find is that sometimes people try to manipulate it and they make it worse.
We see a lot of that. We see a lot of it. And I'm going to be honest, I was one of those. Like if you had a mare and we started dealing with this, I was quick to hand you a bottle of Regumate. I mean, quick to do it. And in the last few years, with some of the mares we've dealt with, I'm not as big a proponent. Because the one thing we've seen is like when we look at this cycle, once it's up and running, and we're in that normal 21-day cycle, we're out of this transition period. We're getting the normal hormonal control. We have everything that we need. These mares do fine. It's that transition where we start to see more painful ovaries. We start to see a little more moodiness because of the actual hormones that are going on. So I've kind of changed my way of thinking here, and you've been a big part of that. So, but yeah, once we get through that transition period, like this cycle, it's pretty much like clockwork. So.
And then during the winter months, they're in something called estrous, where there's really no cycling going on at all. The ovaries are completely shut down. There's very little activity. Now, again, depending on where you are on the globe, sometimes you're still getting some activity. If you're a lot closer to the equator, these seasons last a lot longer. Some of them I feel like don't even really go through an estrus at all. I feel like there are some mares that they're cycling all year round regardless. And
when we look at some of the disciplines, and especially in like the quarter horse, a lot of the quarter horses where they're trying to keep that shorter hair coat, they have lights in their barn and they're regulating, and they basically keep these mares in just a normal estrus cycle year round.
Yes.
And what I've noticed is a lot of those horses don't have the issues that some of the ones that go through that transition have. Because it's just like clockwork.
Yeah.
I mean, it's every 21 days, all these mares get synced up and it's just boom, boom, boom. But they regulate all that based on light in the barn.
Yes. There's a lot of technology too, for people that don't want to, rewire their barn. There's, masks that have blue light on them that can get them there. And there's a lot of really cool, like studies with that too about, that and Cushing's disease. But again, we're not going to go into that. I could go on a whole rant about that. But
when a lot of the ones I see, I've got a lot of horses that go winter down in Florida. And then we kind of get through October and these mares go into an estrus. And then we ship them down to South Florida. and this whole process starts over again. In fact, I've actually got some that have been shipping down earlier. Like as soon as they're done with the show season in October, they're shipping down.
Oh, to kind of skip through that.
They kind of skip through
Interesting.
that. So, and that's actually been kind of successful. But just know, like, if you're one of those people that's going to, especially if you're leaving somewhere further north, like if you're up there in New Jersey, because those days are going to be shorter, when you start shipping down to Florida, you're going to go back through this again. So, but good news, typically the spring's not as bad when you ship back up to wherever you're going, because that daylight's back on that more normal regulatory cycle.
Right.
I would say this is the reason they built so many breeding farms in Ocala, is because they didn't have to regulate the light as much down there.
Very smart. Somebody figured it out.
Yes.
Somebody figured it out.
So, but yeah, so that's kind of how it works. And now there is a few times where this doesn't work like it should.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about that when we start to actually have, because I mean, anytime you have a system, I always say the estrous cycle to me is the most complex, simple system there ever was. On the surface, it's very simple, but there is nothing simple about this at all.
Right.
And sometimes it doesn't go right. So let's talk a little bit about that.
So I'd say the number one pathology we see for, when there's something wrong with the ovaries is the granulosal thecal cell tumor, or the GCT, as we'll call it. It's the most common ovarian tumor that's out there. And what this looks like is stallion-like behaviors. These mares can be very aggressive. They are often, mounting other mares in their pasture. And sometimes they'll show either continuous estrous signs, so the winking, the distraction, everything, or they're not showing any estrous signs at all. So it can look a couple different things on a different, for different mares, but the stallion-like behaviors and the aggression, I think, are the number one complaint that we see with these.
When a lot of times it's almost an overnight change is what I've seen in a lot of these mares. Like they were fine on Monday, and then by Friday they're starting to, I think the biggest one I see is they start trying to bite people. They trying to bite other horses. They really do act like stallions. I mean, they become very aggressive. They get a hard look in their eyes. And ones that have had it going on for a while, you actually see them develop some of the stallion-like characteristics. You'll see these bigger jaw lines.
That's true too.
You'll actually see a difference in their muscle, because now all of a sudden you have to go back and remember, if you have excess estrogen, this can start to get aromatized into testosterone. And so now all of a sudden you've got these mares that are dealing with testosterone. Right.
And testosterone is a normal hormone in mares. It is something that is secreted by the ovaries, and especially during estrus, there is a natural rise in testosterone, but these mares have a lot of it.
A lot. And what I equate it to is, to me, they almost act like young stallions. If you go back and look like a younger stallion, when they first start getting these testosterone surges, they can be very difficult to handle. But if they're handled appropriately, they can learn to manage through this testosterone aggressive. They learn good behavior from bad behavior. The problem is when it happens in these mares, you may have a 13 to 14-year-old mare that has never experienced this level of testosterone. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, they've got this huge spike, and they're having to learn to be a stallion at 13 and 14 years old. That's why they become so dangerous, so unpredictable, because if you look at actual stallions, like this behavior starts becoming apparent as yearlings, but they are taught and trained on how you have to handle stallions in a certain way, and they're taught and trained to handle that. Whereas these mares are all of a sudden in their teens, and they've got this huge spike in testosterone, no idea what to do with it. They don't know how to control themselves, and they can become very, very dangerous very quickly. So,
yes,
if you start to see if your mare starts acting like a stallion, this is not a wait and see thing. We need to start looking now.
Yes. And so, the workup for this is kind of twofold. So we have we want to do a hormonal assay on these girls and, take a look at what's actually being secreted by them. And UC Davis is the one that's done this test, and they were the one that did that study that we talked about at the beginning of the podcast. And they really figured out that the most sensitive way to test for this is actually not just to look at one hormone, but to look at 3 that are being secreted by these ovaries.
Really 4, I would say.
I guess, yeah.
4 because AMH is in there now.
Mm-hmm. So the ones that we're looking at are the testosterone is in there, but they've come to find out that testosterone is not really a reliable indicator of this. The testosterone can kind of look like a lot of different things. They only really called it about 48% accurate in picking it. Yeah.
That's interesting. I have not.
Yeah. If you just use testosterone alone, that you're going to miss probably half of the cases because the testosterone just isn't at that level. Because again, it's fluctuating. It's moving around a lot. Anti-Müllerian hormone's kind of our star of the show here. So this is another hormone. It's secreted by non-dominant follicles. And when we're talking about, breeding, it's kind of one of our measures of fertility. But when this gets really, really, really high, this is one of our slam dunk. Yeah, you've got
this one's high. You have a GCT.
Yes.
Doesn't matter about the rest.
Correct. If this is 98% accurate, if this is above a certain threshold, this is you got a GCT. Because basically these ovaries are just full of follicles. They look like honeycombs when you see them on an ultrasound. They can be crazy. And they're just pumping out all of this AMH just everywhere. The other one that's secreted is inhibin. That's another one. It's about 80% accurate. This one is kind of takes a back seat, but it was, I think that was the first one that came out when they really started trying to get this, because people were only testing progesterone and testosterone for a while.
Well, this was the one, when we first started, when I was in school and first got out, we looked at testosterone, inhibin, and estrogen. And your inhibin was your big one.
Yeah.
So when you had that elevated inhibin, this is the route
that was
you went down. And then I guess probably about 12 years ago, the AMH came out, and that became the slam dunk. And it's great because you still look, inhibin gets 80% of them, which is great, better than testosterone. But when I've got one that's can be 80% and another one's 98, I'm taking 98 all day.
But it can be really helpful to have all of these tested.
We do them all.
We do them all. UC Davis runs the test, and they do a really, really nice job with it. We've even had a couple that we've tested a couple times, even just to see the changes in them.
I was going to say, that's one of the things that I was going to mention. This test isn't necessarily just a one and done. No. Because it can depend on time of year. It can also depend on kind of where, especially early on in the GCT, where they're at in the cycle.
Correct.
So there's sometimes we get it back, and that's one thing UC Davis does a great job of, is they're like, hey, look, this time of year, this may actually be normal. What we want to do is retest in 6 weeks, or we want to retest February, retest March. They really help give us some guidelines because they've really been studying this a lot. Yes. And so sometimes it's not always a slam dunk on the first one. And just because you have a negative the first time does not mean we may not still have this. So your vet may say, hey, we need to retest in a few months.
Right. And, that kind of comes into part 2 of this, is getting an ultrasound of these ovaries, getting an idea of what these ovaries look like, especially when you are running this test, because we had one that we tested. This was a while back, but the blood work all came back normal. But I scanned this ovary, and it was like the size of a softball. I just remember sticking my hand in there, and I was like, oh my God, this thing was massive. And for context, what are the little cuties, the little oranges? That's what an ovary normally should kind of be size wise. And I stick my hand in there, and I'm like, oh my God, this thing is massive. And I, took an ultrasound picture of this, and it was this big ugly ovary. And
I remember that one because we had follicles the size of what
the other ovary was. And I was like, oh my God. And the blood work was completely normal on this mare. And we ended up taking out that ovary anyway, and it did come back as a GCT, even though the blood work was saying it wasn't.
Well, that was one of the places I really wanted to go, is a lot of times we get real focused on lab tests, but if you've been listening to this podcast for any length of time, you're going to hear a lot about clinical exam.
Yes.
And ultrasound's clinical exam. That's the first thing. If I get one of these mares I suspect this on, I'll admit it. Ultrasound in an ovary is like my kryptonite. There's nothing. I can scan anything else on a horse you want to scan. I can run an ultrasound machine. But for whatever reason, an ovary shows up, and I'm like, I don't know, bladder, Caroline, and I always get you to come scan because to me, the accuracy comes when you have lab work and you have that ultrasound.
Correct.
And I'm probably even going to trust that ultrasound more than I will the lab work.
Yes.
Because like I said, referring back to the citrus scale, there's really two scales we use in the medical world. You have the citrus scale, starting with the kumquat, going to the cutie, to the orange, to the navel orange, to the grapefruit. Once you get bigger in the grapefruit, we go into the melon scale. This is where we get into honeydews, cantaloupes, and watermelons. I don't know why we picked those two types of fruit to describe things, but yeah, the citrus scale and the melon scale.
Or balls. I go with like sports balls.
Yes.
That's another one.
Yep.
So
tennis balls, basketballs,
golf balls. Yep.
So, the ultrasound I think is critical because, like I said, we've had, more than just that one, we've had several over the years that the ultrasound is what pushed us to go ahead and remove that ovary. And we come back on histopathy. Like, yep, this was it. But then also at the same time, we've had some blood work that was a little abnormal. We did an ultrasound. We're like, hold up, everything's looking really good here. And these are these horses that are on, as we'll talk about later on, Regumate chronically. We come off of that Regumate, let them settle through, and all of a sudden these hormones drop back down into normal. But that all came from you running the ultrasound and you saying, Dan, I think this thing looks normal. Let's go a different pathway.
Correct. And so that's, again, where, one of the other things that we see, and this is the bane of any, repro vet's existence, is the persistent anovulatory follicle.
Yes.
This is my kryptonite. I hate this thing.
Yeah.
So basically this is this big ugly structure that just sits on your ovary, and it basically acts as a non-functional corpus luteum. It's pumping out progesterone, but it doesn't go away. It won't respond to any meds you give it. The only thing it responds to is time.
Yes.
And it will go on its own schedule, but it will shut down your breeding cycle.
Well, we had
in the middle of the season.
I remember we had the one that it was 6 months.
Yes.
But that we had some iatrogenic medication administration in there, so we'll talk about that later when we get into the management of this.
Manipulation.
Yes.
But these things are a pain in the butt because they can prolong an anestrus, so they can basically prevent them from cycling. But there are some weird cases where it almost seems to cause them to have this like continued estrous behavior while they're there. And I think that some of that may come into how much, why are they there in the first place? Was it there naturally? Was it there because somebody was trying to manipulate something? That I don't know. But I've had a couple where I have gone in to scan them. The blood work has been normal. And we look at these and I'm like, oh, that's why you're being weird, is because you have this big disgusting thing on your ovary.
Well, and I think it has to do with they get just enough estrogen to kind of somewhat I think it puts them into a permanent transition.
Yeah.
That's why I think they have the behavior issue because they're getting just enough estrogen, just enough LH to hit. It's a very similar level to that transition period. And so they're just stuck in permanent transition, which, as we talked about, that's the worst time for these mares. And now they're just stuck there.
Yeah.
They're living in this.
Things are cycling, but nothing's happening.
Right.
Nothing's moving. And yep.
And as you'll see, there's physical behaviors behind hormones, but hormones also play a role in mental behavior as well. I mean, that's, if you think about it, that's what goes and tells the mare to go find a stallion. I don't think they go like, oh, I'm building a follicle, I should go find a stallion. Like this controls mental behavior.
Yeah.
So, yeah, these persistent anovs, they are
pain in the butt. I hate them.
Yes. So, those are your most common things. And so what we typically do is we get the phone call like, hey, I want to manipulate this. I bought a mare, but I really wanted a gelding, is what they're basically saying.
Yep.
So I want to shut this down. And I have really reversed my thinking on this over the years, especially after the last 2 years. I felt like we have dealt with a lot of this.
We've had a lot of them.
And I think it's because we're looking. I think they've been out there a lot more, but I think we're paying attention to this. And so, one of the most common ways people want to manipulate this is using alternogest, a synthetic progesterone. 2 forms. There's a commercially available oral form. We know this is Regumate. There's a generic out there. There's another brand, but it's an alternogest synthetic progesterone. There is a long-acting injectable as well that you can give every 3 to 4 weeks. I'm not the biggest fan of that one.
It's very variable. I really like the oral one because you give them this and it will suppress their estrous sign within about 3 days of starting. You take them off of it and they will start coming back into estrus in about 4 to 5 days afterwards.
Which is what it was originally made for.
Correct.
Was synchronizing mares so that we could get them to breed. And this was for very short-term usage.
But it has turned into something that people are giving every single day for the duration of a show season, which, for some mares, you have to do that. These ones that are showing every single weekend, that like you really need them to just, kind of be tuned in, locked into that. I can get on board with that. But what comes into it being a problem is in these transition periods, because of what I think ends up happening. This is just my theory based off of what we've seen, is that they're not quite in a real cycle yet. And then we start throwing this synthetic progesterone at them. And when you're giving them a synthetic hormone, it will actually stop them from producing that hormone naturally. And because their body's not really sure what it's trying to do yet, you're almost kind of preventing them from actually going into that true cycle. And you're locking them in this kind of weird in-between stage.
When it goes back to, when you look at all the hormones at play here, where you have the estrogen, the LH, and progesterone, we'll call those are 3 big ones. There's some other ones in there. Well, now we're just manipulating one of them. But when you manipulate one, you also affect the other 2.
Yes.
And the thing I think about, where I usually see this, is mares that have been on Regumate for years. Like all of a sudden you find out how long they've been on Regumate. I don't know, when we get her? 5 years ago?
She came on it.
Yeah, and she came.
They always come on it. And
so that's not, and the thing I always like to think about it, and there's no science behind this whatsoever, but that's not normal.
No.
That's not a normal state. They're not meant to, even mares that are brood mares, and if you think about it, in the wild, most mares in normal state is pregnant because they have to reproduce. True. But even so, there's going to be a 1 to 2 month gap in between having one foal and becoming pregnant again. So there's still time in there where they're not pregnant. But we're basically telling them to be pregnant for 5 years. And that system starts to have issues.
It doesn't work. And so I think what I have started trying to tell people is, we have to get through this transition period. We have to let these mares have this transition. And once they've had one normal cycle where they've been able to ovulate, that's when we can start manipulating them. And that's when we can start giving them the alternogest. And it will do what we expect it to do.
And what's really interesting, though, is if we can let them, like what I've seen in the last 2 years, because we've been doing a lot of work with this, is a lot of these mares, if we can manage through that transition period, we never end up on alternogest because we manage through that transition period. They come through it and they have that first heat cycle, and they're like, well, she's really not that bad. Like, we can tell when it's there, but she still goes on and does fine. And all of a sudden, we don't need that manipulation.
Because again, most of these mares, these high performance mares, they've been doing this for a while. Like they know the job.
Exactly.
And they like the job.
And they understand, like, once they get through that transition, like, they're used to working through this.
Yes. We just have to let them, get there to that point.
And one of the things that I talk to people about is when we're into that transition period, let's focus on pain management. Because like I said, you get the ovary gets uncomfortable during this time.
Ovary pain is real.
Ovary pain's real. And I always feel bad talking about this because, like, I don't know what that's like, but I'm just having to go off what I've been told. But if we can manage through it, like, it's amazing what a little bit of Banamine does for a few days and manage through that ovarian pain, get through that first transition and get back to normal, and we're good.
Yep.
In the majority of them.
Yes.
Not all, but in the majority of them, we're good to go. So that, I think, kind of the take home there is maybe grabbing the bottle of Regumate's not our first line of defense.
Right.
Maybe working with your veterinarian, developing a plan to get through these transitional periods into a normal cycle. That'd be a great way to go.
Exactly. And again, every mare's different. Every situation is different. So, that's why it's really important to have this good relationship with your vet. And if this is something that, you've noticed with your mare, start a conversation with us. Like, we'd love to talk about it because, this isn't like a death sentence. This should not turn somebody off of, like, oh, I just don't want a mare. I don't want to deal with this.
Yeah.
I'm like, mares are great. I love mares. I've always had mares.
Some people get along great with them. Some people, they don't. And I say, you need to know that about yourself.
Yes.
If you don't deal well with mares, don't go buy a mare.
Don't get a mare. Like,
people are like, well, they're great. But I'm like, well, if you don't get along with them, well, they're not going to be great.
Yeah, they're not for everybody.
I'm a gelding guy. Me and geldings get along good. Like, that's just the way it was. But, I've got some friends that they would only ride mares. And I will tell you, like, a lot of times these mares, when they hit the show ring, when they're right, they will give you more than a gelding. And there's always exceptions, but these mares, that's why they like them. Like, when everything's dialed in, so they give me everything they got.
You got a partner for life.
Yeah. So, looking at that, I think the take home here is know the time of year, understand what's going on, and maybe try to manage through without the Regumate. It's a few weeks of going through hell, but at the same time, some of these mares that we've looked at our thought here is that this chronic use of progesterone has basically led to a persistent NOV.
Yeah.
And when we've been stuck with some of these for 6 and 8 months and we've tried Ludolice, we tried Sucromate. We tried a lot of different things.
It don't work.
We're just stuck.
It don't work.
And because usually these mares like, oh, the Regumate's not working. I double dose the Regumate, it's still not working. And it's like, let's just reset this thing.
Yes.
Because again, it was always a story. Well, we had her 5 years since she came on it. Well, hold up. Let's really assess this and let's get back to where we should be.
Yes. And it is amazing too how many people we have said, hey, I know this sounds scary, but put the Regumate bottle down and let her do her thing. And people are scared because, again, it's been so ingrained into our brains of, if the mare's got to be on Regumate, she's got to have this. And it can be scary, but it's amazing how many people have told me, you know what, it wasn't that bad.
It wasn't.
It wasn't all that bad. They were expecting the worst, and it'd make it a little dicey, but it ended up all being okay.
Just had one this week. It was the same thing. We worked with this one. Once they got through, this is their first year because we did a lot of work this fall, got them through it. This is their first spring. They're like, you know what? We went through it, and we stayed the course. And it was a little rough for a couple of days. We backed off on what we were asking of her. We didn't push her during those few days. And life's great. Life's great. So
and it pays off in the end. Right,
because now we're not on Regumate. This mare is having a great career right now. We had a few rough days in April. She's doing fantastic. They even said, she just went through a heat, and we really, other than a little bit of winking, we didn't really notice it.
That's awesome.
So fantastic on that. And I think the other thing is, if you are having trouble and it does appear to be hormonal in nature, or you suspect it, get involved with your veterinarian. Find out if you are dealing with a GCT. Also look at your environment. What's going on in your environment? And this is where we go back to that light. Like, Start paying attention. Did they put in a new baseball field next to your barn? Did the neighbor put up security lights?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a new barn worker that's leaving lights on? What things are going on in the environment, and really focus on that light inside the barn.
Mm-hmm.
I've had a lot of mares that, like I said, instead of going back on the Regumate, we have focused on lights.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd be amazed, like a cheap timer from Home Depot and a 100-watt light bulb in the ceiling. I mean, that can completely change a mare's life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, basically the cost of one bottle of Regumate. Because it's about, I've looked at it, it's actually less expensive than a bottle of Regumate to go get a cheap timer from Home Depot.
We should put that on the ad.
And then we're set.
Mm-hmm.
And that can play a huge effect. So, because, when we talk about if we do have one of these issues, if we do have something like a GCT, the treatment for it's an ovarectomy.
Correct. Regumate will not touch it.
No.
Lights will not touch it. You have to take that ovary out.
Right.
And when that ovary's out, as long as nothing's wrong with that other ovary, life is good after that. They can still cycle. Mm-hmm. They can still go on to reproduce.
Right. And it's kind of amazing the difference in the change that happens when that ovary is removed.
Yes.
And one of the things I want to talk about, because a lot of people will get tired of this mare being moody and they want to overectomize her. They want to take both. This is not a great idea. Mm-mm. These mares, like the way we make tease mares, and I don't understand how this works, and I really haven't looked into it, but if we want to make a tease mare for collecting stallions, we overectomize her. Mm-hmm. And she basically goes into a permanent estrous.
Because the uterus is also doing its own regulation of the cycle. Mares are insane when it comes to reproduction. Like cows are like real easy to figure out. Like cows are like the very like basic model when you're like learning repro, because everything just kind of like follows a nice normal pattern. Mares just like do their own thing. They can ovulate while they're pregnant. Fun fact. Like I didn't know that, but like they can do that because
they can ovulate on Regumate.
Yeah, they can. They do what they want. And so, you take their ovaries out and they will continue to cycle, or they continue basically to show estrous signs. Because
I can tell you, I used to do this surgery. I used to do overectomies. Mm-hmm. And our thought process back then was, well, we just overectomize, we make a gelding. That was our honest thought. Like, and now we're going back 15 years ago. But that was kind of our thought. It's like, I just overectomize. You basically just make her a gelding. That's not the case.
It don't work that way.
It does not work that way. I remember being in Kentucky, you'd go through and you'd overectomize a bunch of them because the breeding farms needed tease mares. They cycle.
Yep.
So, not the greatest of ideas.
No. It's not like spaying a dog.
No.
It is not like that at all.
No. So a lot of considerations in here. So, kind of the big take homes you want to think about is, and this is probably the number one thing I'm going to tell you. This is my take home. If you're going to buy a mare, understand this comes with it.
Correct.
This is like buying a horse. They're going to colic and going to go lame. If you buy a mare, you do have a hormone cycle that will be happening. Mm-hmm. You need to understand that.
Yes. And they're not all the same. Some mares you will never know when they're in heat. Mm-hmm. Others you will know it is very obvious when they're in heat.
Right.
But that's what you get.
Yes.
And you have to accept that. And if you're not okay with that, maybe you need to go look at a gelding.
Right.
And geldings are fine.
Yeah.
I'm fine with them. But, that's something you have to accept of.
Right.
And so there are some trainers that we work with that are like, you know what? I don't do mares. And I'm like, you admit that. That's fine.
I'm good with that. Mm-hmm. Because like I said, no, this is going to be part of it. No, this is going to happen. Once you accept that, if you need help working through these things, reach out to your veterinarian. Mm-hmm. Like, we want to help you figure out how to manage. Each one of these mares is different. There's a lot of different ways we can manage. And then also knowing when a problem becomes a problem. So recognizing the signs of GCTs versus we're just going through a transition. Don't buy a mare and say, I'm just going to Regumate and make myself a gelding. It doesn't work that way.
Nope.
So, well, that was kind of that was a oversimplified version of what's going on here.
Yes.
So we'll do some deeper dives into this as we go.
Because again, I think we're going to do a part 2 of this episode because this is a whole workup. The repro part of it is just one puzzle piece of this kind of Moody Mare picture or grumpy gelding picture, really. Because again, like we talked about, 84% of these behavior changes that got submitted had nothing to do with hormones.
Right. So that means only 16% did. So if this is the only place you're looking, you're missing 84% of the problems.
Correct.
So that's why we've kind of, over the years, we've sort of developed our pathway on if you're having behavioral issues, what could be going on here. So we're gonna do some more episodes on that. Because like I said, what we talked about today is only 16% of the problem. So let's go, in the coming episodes, we're going to talk about the other 84. Because the majority of the time, that's where the problem lies.
Yes.
So.
And if you try to manipulate the repro cycle with it, it's not going to work. And then you're going to get frustrated.
Yes.
And then you're going to turn away from mares forever. And you shouldn't because they're wonderful.
No. And the thing I would say is I would not just start with Regumate.
No.
If you're having a behavioral issue, if you learn nothing else from this podcast, don't start with Regumate. Again, only 16% of them are related to hormones. Don't go down that road first. Reach out to your veterinarian and start to develop a plan. Start to develop that plan. Don't just assume just because she has ovaries, it's a hormonal issue. Because what we're finding, that's not the case. So.
Cool.
That's a good podcast.
This was a good podcast.
That was good. So we appreciate everybody listening in today. We really appreciate all of our listeners out there. And thanks for everybody for helping make this possible. Dr. Brown, thanks for being here today. April, thanks for recording all this. Casey, thanks for doing the editing. To our listeners, like and subscribe. Like we'd like to hear from you. If y'all have got questions and ideas for every podcast, send us some more ideas. We're going to be going down this train for a little bit, talking about the grumpy gelding Moody Mare, because I feel like it is that time of year. So, so thanks for all listeners out there. Like and subscribe, and for all of us here at Countryside Equine Hospital. Y'all have a great week.
Bye.
Take care.